Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to an exciting season of Side Stories, Histories, Lost Tales. Oh,
Whoa.
oh, what is that?
Who's that?
Ooh.
What's that?
Oh.
Where's that coming from? Oh, no.
And we are now recording off of the wonderful Rodecaster Pro 2. No, not sponsored, but I had to show that off because I have a soundboard now. And this probably won't be showing up too much in the season. I'll refrain, but I wanted to front load that because, frankly, yeah. It just makes me happy. All right, so here we are on another exciting episode of Side Stories. And we're going to be talking about the Battle of Castle Itter today. Before I jump in there, just because, well, a lot of you who have probably been waiting for this episode to come out might be well aware that it's been about a year since it was supposed to come out. Well, maybe about 9 months or so. And I don't want to get too much into that because I know everyone's going to be like, oh, just tell me about the history. Get to the main point of the episode. We don't care about your personal life or anything, which is not, I mean, you're right. Big facts. But I feel like I should quickly address that we had many delays getting this out, so apologies for that.
Many delays.
Yes, many
Muchos delays.
Too many. If you want to hear a bit more on that, wait for the end. But we're just going to get into the exciting topic of the day, the Battle of Castle Itter. Now, Darian, what do you know about the Battle of Castle Itter? Or at least what's like the main gist of it that you know?
Well, I know that it occurred at the very, very, very tail end of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It almost really shouldn't have happened. It was an entirely unnecessary battle. And the whole story of the battle itself and also the lead up to the battle, the circumstances around which it happened are so crazy and absurd. I think it could be like a Tarantino movie. I think Quentin Tarantino should make a dramatization of the Battle of Castle Itter as his final film.
Or at least somebody should.
Somebody should.
Is a spectacular story, which we are going to get into today. And this has become kind of famous in recent years, or at least a lot more interest has come out about it. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through the basic background, what happened at the battle, and then a little bit about its like legacy and how people have talked about it, that sort of thing. We're just going to jump right into it today. So, Darian, I have done a lot of research into this battle, so will you join me on another exciting episode of Side Stories?
I'm all buckled up and ready to go.
All right, let's do it. So, the Battle of Castle Itter, when Americans fought alongside Germans in World War II. So, Castle Itter, let's start there. Let's start with talking about the castle itself, where the events of the day are going to start. It's located in the town of Itter, which is in the Tyrol region of Austria, which is roughly in the, how to describe it, the kind of the southwest part of Austria and the upper northern part of Italy. That's the rough region that's known as Tyrol.
It's near Venice.
Yeah, near-ish. It's kind of in there. So at the time of our story today, Castle Itter is under the command of the nearby, I can never pronounce this word, but Dachau or Dachau? Dachau. It's under the command of the nearby Dachau concentration camp. I say near, it's 90 miles away, but it's under command of Dachau. Dachau, thank you. Castle Itter also had a very long history. It was not like a new recent building by any means in World War II even. Yes, very old. In fact, Castle Itter was built in the 9th century, used as a fortress in the 13th century, has undergone a number of renovations throughout the centuries, even being used as a hotel in the earliest 20th century before World War II. And a hotel is actually quite fitting to help you visualize what Castle Itter looks like, because I think especially as Americans, when we hear castle, we often think of huge looming structures of high walls, like a drawbridge, the whole shebang.
Most are much less impressive.
Yes.
Much.
Castle Itter is a sizable residence, but it looks more like if a Holiday Inn was a castle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it looks like. And then you built a wall around it. Like an impressive structure, and again, used as an actual fortress in the Middle Ages, but it's not like a gigantic, like built on top of a high mountain, where the gods dwell kind of castle. It's not quite like that.
The castles that we tend to imagine are the ones that are built in like the 15th and even 16th centuries.
Yes,
much newer. If it's built in, you said the 9th century?
Originally, yes.
Yes, it would be very bare bones.
Yes, and again, it's been renovated a number of times, but it's pretty standard, if that makes sense. It has battlements and everything like that, but it's not high fantasy castle. Don't envision that. And after Germany annexed Austria in the lead up to World War II, Castle Itter came under the control of the German government. For a few months in 1942, I found that it was held by the German Association for Combating the Dangers of Tobacco. I wish I could have found more about what they did. I'm assuming it was just some weird, I don't know if it was research or if it was just like headquarters for like propaganda. I can't tell you, but I know it was owned by that, which is fascinating. In 1943, it gets a little more relevant to our story. It came under the command of Dachau prison. Thank you. Again, Darren's so much better at saying that than I am. Where it was then used as a prison. Specifically, it was a prison for valuable political hostages. By the end of the war, mostly French political prisoners were being held at the castle. Now, there were some Italian political prisoners and other people who came and went throughout the years. But for our story today, it's effectively all French, to my knowledge.
And there's some pretty big names in there, too.
Yes, and before we get into the names, let's talk very briefly about pre-World War II France. This will be super short, trust me, but because we do not have time to go into the intricacies of French political history today. But just know that France was really divided prior to World War II, and that will come into play here. So if you know anything about the lead up to the Spanish Civil War, it's somewhat similar to that. Again, it's a very deep political division in France. It's got a dysfunctional government. There's mass demonstrations, strikes, and violence in the streets. Very hard times. But unlike in Spain, France was the victor of World War I, which a lot of people thought should have entered them into a new golden age or an era of prosperity. And they didn't get that at all. Basically, by the 20s, it all just fell apart. So, not great. So when the country was invaded by the Germans in 1940, it was split into the German-occupied half in the north and a puppet regime called Vichy France in the south. What you need to know for today is that the political prisoners being held at Castle Itter were mostly people who had displeased Vichy France in some way. So let's get to know them. And it's interesting, too, is that when you look at the invasion of France and how it fell and then where all the political actors in France ended up, it kind of follows the lines that existed before France was taken over by the Germans. It's interesting how those political divides can shift to the circumstances that they're in, and you still see a clear divide between people who collaborated with Vichy and people who didn't and that sort of thing. Again, it's a lot deeper than what I can describe today, but if you ever want to look into it, it's really interesting. But let's get to the prisoners. So these prisoners included also, I reserve the right to attempt to pronounce French names in the most accurate way possible, but also I also reserve the right to be wrong. That's what I'm saying. I've tried my best. I'm not great pronouncing names.
Prepare for some cringe.
Okay, yes. All right, so it's Edward Dal... Oh, boy, here we go. Can I do it? Edward Daladier, Daladier. Daladier?
I'm not going to be able to help you with these ones, bud.
All right. He was the former Prime Minister of France. France has a presidential system, by the way, so Prime Minister is the second highest office, just so you're aware. And he signed the Munich Agreement, which was the agreement that allowed the Germans to annex the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia just before World War II. So he kind of let them yoink half a country, or a significant portion of it. So that's, he wasn't very popular. There was also Paul Reynaud, who was the prime minister after Daladier, who opposed the Munich Agreement. I imagine what their conversations were like. There was also General Maurice Gamelin, who failed to halt the German invasion of France in 1940. A lot of real winners in this bunch. There was, Kalia de Gaulle, who was the sister of Charles de Gaulle, who you've probably heard of. He was the leader of the Free French in the 1940s, and later the main political force in France throughout the late 50s and 1960s, because he was president for quite a while. And again, Charles de Gaulle is currently, at this part of the war, leading French forces who have now recaptured France, pushing the Germans out in the closing days of World War II. And interestingly, there are two more prisoners I wanted to highlight. Francois de la Roque, and star tennis player Jean-Robert Borotra. They were also prisoners at the castle. Larocque had formerly become the leader of what was called Cross of Fire, which was a political party in France, and later the French Social Party. They were both nationalist parties, and the French Social Party actually collaborated with Vichy France, but later they had a falling out, and the government sent him away for imprisonment. Borotra had been a member of the French Social Party. He was a right-wing tennis player, as it turns out. I believe he's also right-handed, but that's unrelated. And he even became involved in the Vichy government, serving as the Commissioner for Sport and Physical Education. He was very accomplished as a tennis player and was nicknamed the Bounding Basque, because 1940s nicknames are just peak. He became well known for his extravagant playing style and personality. He was in prison because after he stepped down as Commissioner of Sport and Physical Education, he attempted to flee France and join the Allies. Obviously, he got caught, and so he ended up at Castle Itter. He was also later elected to the International Tennis Hall of Fame in the 1970s. So, yeah, as you could see, interesting group of people, right?
Very interesting.
If you imagine walking into a bar and seeing these people.
Something tells me you wouldn't find this particular group of people sitting together hanging out at a bar.
It's funny you mention that, because don't think that just because they're all French they get along. The French hate the French. And many of these people were
if you want to summarize French history,
The
There
French
you go,
hate
right
the
there.
French. Many of these people are also from across the political spectrum. They didn't get along. In fact, I found an article written by a journalist and historian by the name of Stephen Harding, who, by the way, is going to form a lot of the basis of this episode. But as always, I will try my best to cite all the sources in the description of this episode. Something I want to get better at this season is really citing sources. So if you want to read his full article, also have more to say about him later, but Stephen Harding writes in his article about the prisoners, quote, "The VIP prisoners quickly segregated themselves by political persuasion, avoiding each other as much as possible," unquote. So they didn't get along at all. Not one bit.
Even in prison.
No.
In Austria.
Nope. And Harding even mentions that they sat at different dining tables based on politics. So there was a left-wing table, a right-wing table, and a center table, and no one sat at anyone else's table.
Some things never change.
Some things never change. Also, interesting to note is that with all the political prisoners here, many of them also had family members like wives or husbands or, anyone else who might be kind of hanging around them, typically a spouse with them. So it's not just political prisoners, but it's also, again, spouses and other people hanging around. I couldn't find an exact number, at least from any of the articles that I read, that included like how many prisoners there were total. But I imagine it was a decent number of people. Not huge, but, maybe like could end up being anywhere from like 5 to 15 or something like that. Definitely 4 or 5.
And by the time of the Battle of Castle Itter, it was starting to clear out as well.
Yes, it was. But another thing I wanted to mention real quick is that the prisoners were held in cells that had formerly been hotel rooms, and they had service staff from Dachau. And they were allowed to Dachau. They had service staff from Dachau. Thank you. And they were allowed to roam around the castle. Let's take a look at the timeline, see how things play out here. So on April 30th, 1945, Darian, what happened?
You know how good I am with dates.
That's
Eric.
okay. That's okay. Okay. I was going to ask you a question that I realized was really funny. And I was going to ask you, what was the famous thing that Hitler did? And I realized that doesn't narrow it down at all.
Well.
Okay. Late in the war, what was he famous for?
Like, killed himself.
Yes. On April 30th, he committed suicide.
Yes.
So, and then on May 1st.
That's okay.
Yes.
I see.
That's where I was going with there. So thank you for that. Again, sorry. I know dates are more my thing, and even I'm not the best of dates. I had to look at my notes to double check and make sure all the dates were accurate.
I don't get any of them.
Oof.
I'm so alone. Please help me.
Oh. Ouch. That's rough. Sad trombone. On May 1st, Hitler's death was announced on German radio, and news quickly spread, as you would assume. If the end of the war wasn't obvious by now, this was the wake-up call for many people.
Some people weren't terribly happy about that, though.
Many people weren't.
There were some hardcores in the German government who thought, if Hitler can do it, why not me?
Many of them would end up committing suicide. There was basically a mass self-purging.
See, that's what I was talking about. If Hitler can do it, why not me?
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to word it for sure. But yes, there's basically a massive self-purge going on in the German government right now with a lot of people committing suicide or basically running for the border to various countries, some in South America. Another story for another day.
Not all of them.
Not all.
Some of them.
Some ran to the Middle East and had very strange adventures in Egypt and Syria. But again, story for another day, because everyone goes on about the Nazis left to Argentina, and yes, many of them did, but the Middle East ones, I think those are even more those are really weird stories.
And the Antarctic ones. And the space ones.
Again, that's a story for another day, and probably a different podcast. But I mean, according to some people, yes, they did hop on UFOs and fly to the moon. And you ever seen the movie Iron Skies?
No.
Okay, well, that's a whole movie about that wacky premise. It's good. It's totally a parody, by the way, but obviously.
Are we sure?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the real history they don't want you to know. When it became obvious the war was going to end, imagine what everyone did other than suicide. What would the other thing be, Darian, do you think?
Oh, run away.
Yes, panic. Panic began to spread really fast. Also on April 30th, Dachau. Thank you. Dachau's commandant abandoned his post and fled to Castle Itter, where he committed suicide on May 2nd. He shot himself in the chest, lived, and then blew his brain out.
Why?
I don't know.
Not a podcast appropriate question,
no,
but why the chest?
I wish I could find a reason for that. It seems like a really dumb way to do it. Also,
Dumb ways to die.
Yes, I don't know. All I know is that he did it in a very stupid, painful way. So, yeah. This was followed 2 days later by Castle Itter's commandant and guards also abandoning their posts. So now the prisoners are free, but they aren't safe, right? So the guards aren't there. They're hanging out. And, oh no, there are still many roaming hordes of German soldiers trekking through the countryside who posed a serious threat to their lives because, well, if the command structure's gone down, who's to say some random, SS squadron, which again, may I remind you, is not the German military, it's the paramilitary of that was part of the Nazi party, just to clarify, because that distinction will become important later. But the SS squads are running around just shooting people.
So if you're familiar with Roman history, this is a common theme.
Yeah.
Sometimes the army gets uppity.
Uppity, yes. And especially when it's a paramilitary that isn't in the regular military.
Right.
The discipline's even worse. And it's mostly political agents and other weird things at this point. Yeah, the SS was starting to go even more insane than it already was. 1945 SS might be the scariest just because you don't know what these people are going to do. Like, it was already rough at the beginning of the war. Now it's like the professionalism's gone out the window. They'll just do whatever they want.
Every man for himself.
Yes, we're in the part of the story where the rats leave the ship, as it were. The French prisoners don't want to just leave and walk around because you don't know who's going to come and just start shooting at you.
You're also in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's in roughly like rural Austria. Like, where do you go?
Like the foothills of the Alps.
Yeah, exactly. There's not many places to really run. I mean, there's small villages, but who knows if the Austrian resistance is controlling them or if it's the SS or the main army or, again, you have no real contact with the outside world. Who knows what's going on? So, the prisoners were able to break into Castle Itter's weapons room, arming themselves with what they found. It's also out about this time that a wounded SS captain, Kurt Siegfried Schrader, great German name, arrived to take care of the prisoners, having been sent by Itter's now departed commandant. So the commandant at least sent them someone to take care of them, and Schrader won't play a huge story. Again, he was injured in some way. I couldn't really find the exact...
Now, when you say take care of, do you mean like make sure they're safe or make sure they continue to be prisoners?
Maybe a little bit of both. It's mostly to keep them physically safe, I believe.
Because they're important prisoners.
Yes.
It would be a bad look if anything happened to them.
Yeah, as far as I know, he's not really... He doesn't really care about the lost Nazi cause anymore. He's more of interested in just saving his own skin and make sure the prisoners don't get hurt.
Because he was in the Wehrmacht.
No, he's in the SS.
Oh, he is in the SS.
Yes, he's an SS captain. He's not, because the Wehrmacht, again, is the German military, for those who don't know Hearts of Iron 4. The German military is the Wehrmacht, and the SS is the armed wing of the Nazi party, who are the more just crazy political agents and all that sort of thing, who also fight with the military but are their own organization. It's its own rabbit hole. He's in the SS, so he's on the supposedly more ideological side of things, but whether or not he was, and whether or not the SS as a whole was more ideological, air quotes, a story, or actually a question for historians who have really dived deep into that story more than I have, so let's leave it there. But yes, he's in the SS, and he's there to take care of the prisoners, and sources say he had become disillusioned with Nazi ideology. Him and about half of the SS, the other half had gone completely schizo by this point, which probably influenced his decision to help out the prisoners instead of just, shooting them and running away, because he didn't, so that's nice of him, I suppose. With little other option, the prisoners and Schrader are like, okay, well, how are we going to get out of this one? Well, the only thing to do is, what do you think? What options do you really have?
Well, you can try to make a run for it. That seems pretty risky. You can maybe try to radio for help. Or you could sit on your butt and hope someone finds you.
They kind of went with options 2 and 3 combined because they don't have a working radio. Well, actually, one of the prisoners actually did have a smuggled in radio, but I believe it just received. I don't think it was a transmitting radio. So what they do instead is that, well, they want to stay put, but they also really want to find help. So instead, they get a messenger to go out. And his name is, it's either Zvonimir or Zvonimir Kakovic, also known as Andre. He was a Yugoslavian communist resistant member turned political prisoner brought to the castle as a handyman, more specifically an electrician from what I've read. Don't really know where he was before this, but I guess they just thought, oh, we got a spare Yugoslavian somewhere. Just, send him over to Itter, I guess. Now, Andre apparently volunteered to go out and ran to the nearest village. He apparently stole a bike from a nearby village as well and began looking for any allied unit to bring to the castle. After waiting for a bit, a second messenger, the castle's Czech cook, Andreas Krobot, was sent out. Yes, the messengers were apparently named Andre and Andreas because history is never confusing.
Never.
And I've also noticed that sources differ on which messenger made contact with which outside forces. But the important thing is that one of the messengers ran into a man by the name of Joseph Gangl, who was a major in the German Wehrmacht. He was a German officer. And he had apparently had contacts with the Austrian resistance, and Gangl was totally disillusioned with being involved in this war anymore and really just wanted to get out of here alive. That was his thing. So upon hearing of the situation at Castle Itter, Gangl agreed and sent the messenger off to the southwest to go and find American forces for further assistance. The messenger actually ran into a German-speaking American officer, Major John Kramers, who pulled together a rescue group composed of multiple tanks, trucks, and infantry that set off for Castle Itter. However, they would be delayed by German artillery fire. Keep these guys in the back of your mind. They'll come into play later. And Gangel himself went in the opposite direction. He was waving a white banner, trying to show that he was surrendering. And I believe he was driving some sort of Jeep or truck or something like that. And so he's basically driving around the German countryside, or Austrian, excuse me, trying to find anybody who isn't going to shoot him, basically. And he made contact with American forces and shared his story. It was here that Captain Jack C. Lee, a tank commander in the U.S. Army, volunteered to assist Gangel with defending the prisoners.
And might I add, Jack Lee is about the most American Army officer that this guy could have possibly found.
Yes.
He is straight out of Inglourious Basterds.
He really is. We're gonna get into it here. So Lee
he's a caricature.
He really
he is a real life living caricature of an American Army officer.
He's a walking, talking stereotype.
Yeah.
Okay, just listen to this. Lee wasn't given much to work with. He wouldn't have much time. He didn't have many men. By the time Gangel and Lee got to Castle Itter, their force consisted only of Lee's tank, which was named the Besotten Jenny. Great name. And then Gangel's truck, which apparently did not have a fun name recorded by history. Unfortunately.
It would be great if it did.
I wish it did, but no source mentioned it. I was very disappointed by that because Besotten Jenny is such a great name. I'm like, what did they name it? And they also had about 20 to 25 soldiers from the two men's forces. So it's a combined American and Wehrmacht force.
Mm-hmm. So you have Americans and Germans
coming together
to fight.
Other Germans. The evil Germans.
You have the questionable Germans siding with the Americans to fight the unquestionably evil Germans.
So you know in an RPG when you get the token evil team member of your party? This is like that moment in the story where you're going to fight the greater villain of that random evil guy you've been fighting all game. You're like, huh.
And I, honestly, as far as I can tell, Gangel is he's a decent guy. I mean, he was in the Nazi military. But not,
I mean,
a job's a job.
Why he was in it? Well, only he could answer, and sadly, we can't dig him up to ask. But
he was very much fed up with the war, with the party, everything.
How he got in is questionable. How he left is not. And I guess
it's admirable.
It's admirable, yes.
As you will see.
Yes. And so they had left the command post, by the way, with another tank in Lee's squadron called the Bouch Buster. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. It's B-O-C-H-E.
Bouch
Buster.
I don't know.
Could be pronounced multiple different ways. Anyways, and they had a few extra men with them, but they had to get left behind to guard important roadblocks on the way to Itter because, again, there's still roaming hordes of Nazis running around. They kind of need to guard all the important checkpoints and bridges and all that sort of thing. So unfortunately, they weren't quite able to take everyone with, but they got a tank. That's not bad. They got some troops. It's all right. When the American-German force arrived, the French prisoners were less than impressed because they're French. They had expected more than a ragtag group of Americans and their new German friends.
They should be grateful for anything.
They really should be.
Because they are in quite the pickle. But, stereotypes are wrong.
But unless they're about the French. Also, I should inform you, there's a lot of older French people. Mm-hmm. Some of them are in their 70s. Yeah, they're going to judge the heck out of you no matter what you do for them. Yeah. That's just part of their culture, okay? The French also were understandably not too keen on working with the Germans.
That is understandable.
I wonder why.
Yeah. It's not like it was the Germans who put them in this predicament in the first place.
But they're wearing the same uniform and, kind of gets questionable. Mm-hmm. It raises a few questions, Also, Gangel did do his best to be polite and to work with them. Lee, however, caricature that he is, made an instant bad impression. He was a gruff New Yorker, and he had no interest in endearing himself to the French.
And the French, I'm sure, were not at all interested in trying to get along with a gruff American like him.
Nope, not at all. In fact, Reynaud later wrote that Lee was, quote, crude in both looks and manners. And he even went so far as to say, if Lee is a reflection of America's policies, then Europe is in for a hard time, unquote.
And he's a New Yorker, too. He's like the gruffest of the gruff Americans.
Especially in the 40s?
Especially in the 40s.
Oh, my gosh, New York. It's wild now. Back then, oh, my gosh, just insane. So, yeah, you can see this is a motley crew of a bunch of well, it's a bunch of French losers and the Americans who know what they're doing and Germans desperate to avoid a court-martial.
The French's hearts are about to be kick-started.
Thank you for that Motley Crue reference. I didn't expect one in this episode, but hey, we got one.
You never expect them.
We always need a reference in every Side Stories episode of some classic rock act.
I agree.
I think we've hit it probably in like
Pretty
every
close.
episode too. We've mentioned Keith Richards enough on this show. My goodness, he was probably there, by the way. Just for the record, he was around. He probably was hanging around the corner somewhere. You know, he's always around.
At least they didn't get a bunch of girls.
That is the worst joke you've ever made on this show.
It's a race to the bottom.
Oh gosh, that was really good. But anyways, despite the French's indignation, which they're eternally indignant anyway, so who cares, right? They weren't going to get much else, right? Lee quickly began to find positions for his men and parked his tank in front of the main gate, as you do, because you don't want anyone coming through that gate, right? Makes sense.
Good place to put a tank.
Yep. He recognized that he didn't have a safe way of moving everyone. Again, there's so many prisoners. They are probably overloading that tank and that truck already. There's no way they can take all of the old French people, put them in a tank and a truck, and their spouses and all that, and get them all out in one go. It's just not feasible. And if you get ambushed, right when you're carrying the former French prime ministers and you get them killed, how are you going to explain that to anybody, right? You can't really just move all these people, right? They can't just put them on a truck and say, all right, best of luck.
Or a train.
Or they just can't put them on a truck. Anyways, so he recognized he didn't have a safe way of moving them. His plan was to stay put and defend Itter until reinforcements could arrive. It was a castle, after all, so it made a good defensive position. That's logical. Now, it was about a little after the Americans and Germans arrived, after they got set up, that a small force of SS troops came upon Castle Itter and began to attack. Now, we're not sure, at least, again, from what I've read, about why they chose to attack. Like, if they just saw Americans and were in that position, they thought, okay, let's fire on them. Or if they knew that important prisoners were there going to, execute or capture them.
It's hard to say.
Hard to say, but either way, they are under attack. So I don't think anyone at the time was really interested in discussing why this was happening. It was more of, it's happening. Let's avoid getting killed. Please and thank you. So the American and German troops, again, not the SS. I'm going to refer to the people attacking as the SS and the guys defending as the Germans, just for the record. I'll try to keep that as clear as possible. So at around 11 at night, they began being shot at by machine gun and rifles and pistols and all that sort of thing. Even the prisoners helped defend the castle, by the way, firing at the German, or the SS, along with the German.
Firing at the SS with the Germans.
And the Americans. You can see why the story is confusing.
Yeah.
And during the night, 2 more Austrian resistance fighters arrived to help the defenders, but the numbers were still not in their favor. At first, fighting was sporadic, again, small arms fire, but once the dawn began to arrive, on the morning of May 5th, there was an estimated 100 to 200 SS troops attacking the castle. So they are horribly outgunned, outmanned, and undersupplied to be defending Castle Itter.
And if they were not in a castle, an actual fortification, this would be a very different story.
They would have they would have had to run.
Even if they had a good hill.
Yeah.
This would be very different.
Oh, yeah. A hill would not be enough against that many guys when you're that outgunned. If you have, I think it'd be lucky to say they had 30 people defending this place against 200.
And like half of those were elderly French statesmen.
Yeah, exactly. It's not good. It's a bad time to be on the Allied forces. They are hiding inside Castle Itter. By the way, the Germans have a little bit more than small arms fire. By the time that the dawn broke, they have an 88 millimeter anti-tank gun and a 20 millimeter flak gun, which they're using to blow the upper portions of Castle Itter to Kingdom Come.
Also, 9th century castle, not exactly built to withstand 20th century artillery fire.
No, I mean it
had a few facelifts and upgrades, but still, it's hard to build a fortification out of stone that can withstand actual artillery fire.
Yeah, maybe a few shots here
just
and there.
as Constantinople.
Yeah, well, and that was a very thick wall, by the way. They do not have the Theodosian walls here.
No.
Very short of it. Again, it's not nothing, but it's trying. The castle's trying, but it's not going to hold forever. So they need to figure out a way to hopefully get rid of that anti-tank gun, which, by the way, they are going to start using the actual tank that they have to return fire, the Basat and Jenny. And so a crew is inside there, and they're about to return fire, but unfortunately, one of the anti-tank shots hits the Besotten Jenny, which forces the crew to bail out and run for the castle just as the tank became engulfed in flames. So they've lost their tank. Luckily, no one was killed, though.
Imagine this Quentin Tarantino movie. The movie writes itself.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. I mean, you could just see this all happening. And the SS began to swarm the castle with the tank knocked out of the fight. And they're attempting to come from multiple angles because there's a tree line and there's also a hill behind the castle as well. So they're trying to kind of envelop the whole castle, right? And Lee and Gangle attempted to spot the anti-tank gun from the roof, but sadly, Gangle was shot and killed by a sniper. So he ends up being, if not the first casualty, one of the first. And again, they do not have a lot of men. The defenders kept taking losses throughout the early morning as other casualties mounted up. I'm not really sure on what the total casualty list ends up being, by the way, but I believe the Germans defending take more casualties than the Americans defending, even though it's pretty much even. So Itter's defenders were putting up stiff resistance with what they had, but they're losing.
Imagine what that night is like. First night, probably very scary at first, but things seem to be pretty much 50-50 even. They're holding out.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're actually doing this. But then second night, after a full day of fighting, taking artillery fire, there's a sniper somewhere, and people are starting to get pecked off. One of the, Gangle, one of the main commanders,
he's down.
Gets taken out. I wonder what it's like to be one of those people.
Oh, gosh. It's not quite a full day, by the way. So there's not a second night. They go through the first night. The attack starts at 11, but there's still a few hours to go through here. So it's really more of the morning fight. But imagine waking up that morning and seeing and getting that. But you're still right, though, because imagine seeing that morning, going through and watching people get picked off. And as the day starts to move on and more of the SS are coming, and you're basically fighting off a horde of invaders. This is super nerdy. I wanted to avoid saying this, but it's kind of like Helm's Deep because Lord of the Rings. I know it's a dumb reference. Shut up, I made it. It counts. It's kind of what's happening right now, okay? I went and did it. And it was at this time that we returned to Major John Kramers, who you remember earlier, was attempting to form a rescue party. He arrived at the nearby town of Wargle, which should be a metal band, by the way, where he could see the attack on Itter in the distance. Unfortunately, remember that armored force he was compiling?
Yep.
He didn't have that anymore.
What happened?
Well, funny you ask. But what happened was that when he set off for Itter originally, he left his infantry division's designated area of operations, and he had entered a different division's area. Now, for some dumb reason, whoever was in charge got hung up on bureaucracy and ordered Kramers to halt his forces. Kramers was understandably enraged by this, so he left his forces behind and went on to Itter in a jeep with just 3 other men. One was a French liaison officer, and the other 2 were journalists. He had literally no one here to actually help him.
He's a one-man army. He's all he needs.
He's one angry American soldier desperately trying to save a bunch of stuffy French guys.
It's worth several men at least.
Yeah, he's the cream of the crop, which, as we know, due to our friend Macho Man, always rises to the top.
Always.
Thankfully, Kramers was able to find Lee's other tank and rallied infantry from Lieutenant Colonel Marvin Coyle's forces. Coyle, not being a bureaucratic idiot, quickly signed off on Kramers' rescue mission. Kramers attempted to radio Lee to no avail, but then an Austrian resistance member pulled him aside and brought him to Wargle's town hall, which apparently had not been damaged by the attack. And he was able to telephone Castle Itter because they had a phone line that ran.
So, mid-combat, Castle Itter is being besieged. No one here is natively, Austrian.
Yes.
They're all foreigners
outside
fighting
of the
for
few
their
resistance
lives.
members that showed up.
Outside
of them, yes.
Outside of the resistance members. You're mid-combat. Things are not going well. You're not sure if you're going to survive to see the next day. And then the phone rings.
Bring. Imagine getting that.
Quentin Tarantino.
Imagine getting that call. History has sadly not recorded what the look on everyone's faces was, but I really want to know, who picked up?
See, what I imagine is in one of those classic horror movies where you're stuck in the house. There's something outside trying to get in, and then the phone rings, and everyone just looks at each other like,
"What was that?
What do we do?"
Yeah. Imagine you're hearing M1 Garand and MP40 fire off in the distance. You're hearing men scream. They're taking fire. Someone's getting hit. All of a sudden,
battlements are crumbling to the ground.
Yes, the flak gun is taking out the upper echelons of the castle. And all of a sudden, you're it's everyone just like, is someone gonna get that? It's honestly, it's lucky they picked up in the first place, because at that point, you could almost reasonably be Like, obviously you should pick up, but I can understand under the stress of the whole situation, missing that call and just...
They pick up, and what they hear is, I'd like to talk to you about your car's extended warranty.
I hate these calls. Your tank's extended warranty. Oh, a little late for that one.
Yep. I think I voided the warranty on that one.
Does it have German insurance? Hang up. So, on the phone, Lee talked to Kramers, and he told Kramers that they're running very low on ammunition. Kramers assured him that help was on the way and sped off in his Jeep, following tanks and half-tracks that were on their way to Itter, which was only a few miles away. The phone call did raise everyone's spirits in the castle, but didn't help the immediate situation in really any other way than morale. It's like, okay, good, help's on the way. That's great, makes me feel happy.
But it's not here yet.
It's not here yet. And by noon, the defenders had almost completely exhausted their ammunition. They are down to the last cartridges. It is now that Borotra volunteered to leave the castle to guide the incoming reinforcements to the castle. Lee agreed, and Borotra took advantage of a pause in the fighting. He jumped over the castle wall, dashed 40 yards of open field, and evaded SS lines as he sprinted through the forest. This guy was definitely built. He was truly a professional athlete if he could pull that off. And very brave, too, because that is... Wow, getting out of your defensible position to go and dodge SS snipers and machine gun fire is really something.
When you're not in the military.
Exactly,
You're a tennis player and a politician.
Yeah, and apparently he had been wielding a rifle, too, and shooting back at the SS the whole time. Like, he was one of the main guys fighting. Him and Larocque were two of the main ones. There were a few others, too. I believe both the prime ministers did as well, but... It usually in stories they really mention that Borotra specifically was in the fight, too, like everyone else, which don't know if he was ever in the military. I don't think he was, so I'm assuming he was just some random untrained guy, which I guess they'll take what they get at this point.
Maybe he knew how to shoot.
Oh, I'm sure, but like beyond that, it's like, I wonder how much of like tactics he really knew. But again, unfortunately, can't ask him. He's kind of long dead, unfortunately. Rest in peace. But Lee, he adopted a strategy straight out of ancient siege warfare, which I just love. This is great.
Build a wall around the besiegers. You besiege them.
No, he didn't pull a Caesar, unfortunately. And if he had more men, yes, but unfortunately he didn't. He only had about 30. And remember, to build the wall around the people besieging you, you need more men than the people besieging
more than about,
you.
Yeah. More than 30.
Vercingetorix got so clowned on. It's ridiculous.
It was overnight, too.
It was.
That's the power of a Roman legionary, which
they
could really use
if
right
we
about
could
now.
really use a Roman legion right about now. Where are they when you need them?
Give me back my legion.
Literally, please. It's always the Germans, too.
Yep.
We need them. We got to fight off the Germs.
The SS.
The SS, yeah. Well, they're still German. One might say they were hyper-German, but that is a debate I'm not going to have.
That's a different podcast.
Different podcast. So if the SS troops wanted to take the castle, Lee was going to make them fight because he slowly began to pull men off the battlements and into the castle's keep, right? Again.
Which you do when things are not going well.
Especially in your siege. Again, he's fighting this just like a Roman or medieval battle would go. It's like, okay, we've sent basically our missile troops, the guys with the rifles, to take out as many as we can. As they keep approaching, getting closer, we're going to take guys off the walls and get into a defensible position and form basically a hardened core.
Testudo.
Yes, to get them, to make them spend as much time and resources as possible taking this place. That's exactly how you fight a siege. Brilliant work. He knew his history, apparently.
That's how you lose a siege, but
well, if you're not gonna outright win, you can go down fighting. They used whatever remaining ammo they had, and they planned to use knives, bayonets, and whatever else they could find to stall the assault until help arrived.
Again, this is what happens when sieges are going poorly.
This is usually the bad
is how you
phase.
lose with honor.
They're trying, and at the very least, it does make sense that again they know help is on the way, so if they can just get to a core of defense, they might be able to hold them off. And the SS started to see that the defenders were retreating deeper into the castle. They began to creep closer and closer, reaching the castle's main gate. They began to load an anti-tank rocket to blow the gate wide open. They were about to rush into the castle. But
and then the winged hussars arrived.
Yes! When suddenly shots from a tank's cannon rang out behind them. One of the German defenders atop the castle shouted, I, again, don't speak German, but it's Amerikanische Panzer, which is American tanks. I tried my best on that one. Alerted the SS to the approaching armed force. The infantry wasn't far behind and is being led by Borotra, who he had found Kramer's force and led them to the castle. And also Borotra had apparently requested an American uniform. I don't know why. I guess he just thought he wanted one. He thought they were stylish or thought it was better to... I don't know what he was wearing beforehand, really. I don't know. Maybe it just was more fitting for combat. I have no clue. But I guess he threw one on, and he was basically acting as their like.
I imagine him like standing on the top of one of the tanks, wielding his rifle.
Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't quite say. I know that he was helping to lead a tank column, I guess. So that's fascinating.
Lived a full life.
He really did. I mean, this guy, I like him.
Yeah,
he sounds pretty
he's
cool.
a cool guy.
Yeah. And so, anyways, the cavalry was riding in for the rescue, and the SS, quickly seeing that they were totally screwed, ran away. This is how you lose a siege.
Yes.
They rushed into the tree line, apparently never to be seen again. Some say they're still. I'm just kidding. No, they're not roaming the Austrian countryside.
And if you're not a good boy,
the SS will get you.
The SS will come and get you.
This is a very scary bedtime story. I preferred the ghosts and the boogeyman. So the Battle of Castle Itter had ended in a shocking Allied victory. Lee, Gangel, and Kramer's men had somehow pulled off something of a miracle, a Tarantino Spielbergian miracle, if you will. While the exact numbers are hard to find, they had inflicted far more casualties on the SS than they had taken, and none of the VIP French prisoners had been killed. So mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Way to go.
3 stars on that one.
Yeah, you got an S rank on this mission. The journalists who accompanied Kramer's quickly began interviewing everyone involved as they had stumbled upon the story of a lifetime. So that's also probably why this story became pretty well known, is that right as it ended, journalists were on the scene to interview everybody, which doesn't really happen too much in, warfare like this.
At all, really.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I imagine there was a huge amount of excitement. They're taking notes and writing everything down.
Do we know, so Gangel is dead?
Yes, he passed away.
Did he die immediately, or how long was he alive? Do we know?
From everything that I've heard, it seems like it was a pretty instant death.
Okay.
Like it's not like there's not like down to the second or anything like that, obviously.
Right, yeah.
But from every way I've seen it like depicted or discussed, it's like he got hit by a sniper and he was gone. So I'm assuming either center of mass, chest, or headshot.
The only way the story could be more cinematic would be if he lived long enough to see the victory.
And then he died, and
then
everyone's like, no.
Yeah. and then they like draped like an American flag over him.
He was an honorary American. They like close his eyes. They give him a funeral. They sing the battle hymn of the Republic.
And then they shipped him to Nuremberg.
As he would have wanted. Bury me in New York. Oh, no, it's like...
Nuremberg.
No, I know. No, I know. That was a joke. That was the joke. Okay. No, do you ever seen The Hunt for Red October?
Yeah.
The movie?
Yeah.
Do you remember when, I think it's Borodin Nights, like, I would have liked to have seen Montana. It's like, I would have liked to have seen New York, and he's a dramatic death.
I thought you said Boromir.
No, he died doing something else.
That was a very different movie.
No. Well, Sean Bean probably died in both of them. I don't think he was in Hunt for October. If he was, he definitely died. No, it was Sam Neill who played that character in that movie. By the way, shout out to Sam. He should be in the Castle Itter movie. Sam Neill's great. Yeah, he could play something. Anyways, well, we can cast that movie after we're done with this. We're almost done. So 3 days later, on May 8th, World War II officially came to an end in Europe. There were a few pockets of resistance that would hold out for a few more days, but the war was won, and Castle Itter ended up being one of the very last battles of the European theater, and by extension, World War II as a whole. For reference, just to put this on the timeline, the last major battle of World War II was, Darian, do you know off the top of your head? It's okay if you don't. I just want to ask.
I do not.
It's the Battle of Okinawa, which began on April 1st, 1945, and ended on June 22nd. The fighting on Hacksaw Ridge, again, made famous recently by the Mel Gibson movie. Great watch, by the way. But the battle at Hacksaw Ridge on Okinawa ended the day after Castle Itter. So it's simultaneous, basically. That's what's happening in the two major theaters that are still left, the Pacific and the European theater, which is coming to a close. And also, just for a little more timeline, and for a little more of the timeline here, the atomic bombing of Hiroshima was on August 6th. Nagasaki was bombed on August 9th. Small air encounters and other skirmishes continued until the end of the war on September 2nd, 1945, which was the formal surrender of the Japanese, marking the official end of World War II in the Pacific and the war as a whole. So Itter comes again very late in the war. As for what became of those who fought at Itter, this is the part of the movie where we have like the "Where are they now?" segment. Yeah. The American soldiers returned to their duties, while the Germans were brought into POW camps to await whatever their post-war fates were going to be. And I'm sure if you looked at every man who fought at Itter, I'm sure they ended up in very strange, interesting places because I mean, what do you do with them now? Like, they fought on the Allied side. What do you do, right? Maybe that's something we could have to see. I really couldn't find a ton about that, but maybe if I did some deep diving, there's a bit more out there about that.
I mean, I don't know what sort of atrocities all these German soldiers may or may not
have or known about.
But I hope that their involvement in the victory of Castle Itter
maybe helped
Help them out a little bit.
Little bit. If we could paperclip people who were definitely involved in very bad atrocities, I'm hoping the guy who switched teams at the end maybe got a little leeway. Look, I'm just saying, I think he earned it. Come on. Like, look, come on. Everyone loves a redemption arc, okay? Come on. Just like Werner von Braun, who did get his redemption arc, by the way. As for the French, Renaud and Daladier, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce that dumb French name. What the French guy? You know, I don't. I'm gonna give up. I'm sorry, I can't get his name right. Whatever. They would both go on to hold office after the war, while Barotra would play tennis professionally into the mid-50s.
The
1950s. Yes.
I thought you meant his 50s.
Actually, it probably was close to that time in his age.
Impressive.
Actually, so yeah, he played tennis professionally for a very long time, and I think he did like exhibition matches and stuff past the 50s. And I might be wrong on that, but I think he was pretty active right up until he died. And people actually did talk to him about like Castle Itter and stuff. He became kind of famous for it. So yeah, I think he was pretty happy to talk about it typically. So there's another fun fact for you. The other French prisoners returned to their lives in France, which needed, of course, be rebuilt after the massive devastation of World War II. Gangel became something of a hero in Austria, and a street in nearby Wargel was named in his honor. I don't know if it's still named after him to this day, but I assume it is. So there you go. And Jack Lee, our American caricature hero, the John Wayne of this story, was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions at Itter. Castle Itter still stands to this day, now under private ownership. It is not currently open to the public, but its very existence stands as a memorial not only to its rich Austrian history, which of course stretches back centuries, over millennia actually. It also is a testament to the bravery of the men who formed the most unlikely of alliances inside its walls. So that's where everything ended up. Oh, and the SS guys, they like ran into the woods and no one ever saw them again or something. I don't know what happened to them, but there you go. Fun fact.
I wonder how many of them got away and integrated into society and their children are
still roaming the woods.
Not that their children are
bad people.
Just it's interesting thought that there's probably a good number of them who
maybe don't know.
The Austrian wilderness is vast.
It is. Who knows where they ended up? The Nazgul, as they were. I don't know. I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings is on my whatever. Anyways, but let's wrap things up here. So, of course, all sources will be in the description if you want to read more. I wanted to mention just a few things. Again, I must thank historian Stephen Harding, whose article on the subject went on to form the basis of his relatively recent book. It was 2015 that it came out, called The Last Battle, which covers the Battle of Castle Itter in extreme detail. So I did not, unfortunately, have access to this book in time for the episode to release, as this has been delayed very, very long. So I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I did read the article that formed the basis of the book. So if you want to learn more, go ahead and read Harding's book. I'm sure it's a page-turner and a great, great read. So I just want to send you guys in the right way. And all the other sources, again, will be in the description below. Also, speaking of movies, if you've been hoping for a Castle Itter movie, you might be in luck.
Really?
You might be. Harding announced in 2015 that the book had been optioned for a movie. But I haven't been able to find anything else on that. The last updates came around 2017. There's articles that mention it was happening still. Maybe we'll get it one day. There were some people attached to it. It kind of just entered into a lull.
I don't know why it's not a movie now. You hardly need to write a script.
I know.
The script has already been written for you.
There's even a quote on the front of The Last Battle, like the book itself, where it says, Steven Spielberg, how did you miss this story?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's the perfect... I don't know how any World War II... Think about it. We are old enough to remember the golden age of World War II first-person shooter video games. Like, how did none of them include this? Not a single one.
I mean, you don't need to alter any of the storyline to have a good story.
It just makes... You literally
It has a good Hollywood ending, too.
The thing I just told you, just go make this a movie. I'll direct it. Give me money. Come on, I'll do this. Also,
get Leo DiCaprio to play Jack.
Sam Neill can play Gangle. And then we need, who else could be this movie? Who else do we need? Jack Black. I don't know why.
He can play either Andre or Andreas.
Yeah, he can be one of the two. Yeah, there you go. I don't know why. Yeah, sure, why not? Have him in there.
The one who gets the bike. I think that's a good role for Jack Black.
Steals the bike and drives it. Yeah, it'd be sweet. I think that'd be a good one for him.
Tenacious D can write the soundtrack.
If only Lemmy was still alive, we could have got Motorhead.
Yeah.
They would have done it too.
That would have been great.
Sick. Darn. But if you're into metal, there is a Sabaton song about this. It's called...
actually the song that turned me on to the story. I listened to the song. I was like, what the heck are they talking about? Like Americans and Germans fighting together? What?
Is this some weird old history? Like, no, it's real history.
It's real history.
The song is called The Last Battle. It's pretty good. There's a Sabaton song about almost every cool battle in history. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check it out. It's very good.
If Sabaton can find it, why not Steven Spielberg?
I know, right? You think you'd have more resources than some random Swedish band, but I guess
Well, not just some random Swedish
Well,
band.
okay, whatever. Okay, yeah, the Swedish band. All right. Also,
well, not the Swedish band. I mean,
that's ABBA.
ABBA. Thank you.
I'm glad we both we respect ABBA on the podcast. Okay, we respect ABBA.
I too am a dancing queen.
I'm not gonna say it. I also go on. No. I saw that look. Don't say it. Okay. I also
dancing queen.
No, we're gonna get the podcast blocked. ABBA's gonna come get. Do a mess of ABBA. Don't you sing on this? No, they're gonna come get us. No, don't do it. Okay. Trying to end the podcast here. I'd also like to mention that there is a Wendigoon video about this battle. You will not find it in the description just because I actually avoided watching it because I didn't know it existed until I was basically done writing this whole episode. And since with history, right? You're telling the same story, typically. Like, I know it depends on source, and I tried to follow sources as close as possible and get everything as accurate as I could. But at the same time, I noticed that Wendigoon's video was 30 minutes in length, so I know he's going way more in depth than just like the 5-minute overview videos you can find from a lot of channels, which I will link because I use them as sources. But I avoided his video. It's nothing against him. I just want to mention that, yes, he does have a video. If it comes off as suspiciously similar, it is definitely a coincidence. I know no one's going to believe me, but I did not watch it.
I will fully admit, when I heard the Sabaton song, I was thinking like, this is interesting. I want to learn more about this. I did go to the Wendigoon video.
Oh, good. Okay, so
I've watched it. It's very good.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully it reflects the same thing, and I didn't accidentally steal any of his punchlines. Because
no,
all right, good. Because I respect Wendigoon. I've seen a few videos. I'm not the biggest fan because I don't watch him all that much or anything. But like, he's fine. But just wanted to mention, I'm sure it's good. Check it out if you want. But you won't find it linked here because I didn't watch it. And then there are a few final things I did want to mention before we go today. There was also Operation Cowboy, because as it turns out, Castle Itter was not the only time Americans and Germans fought alongside each other. It often is quoted as such, but that's actually not true. I'm not going to go into all the details about Operation Cowboy, but basically, what you need to know is that German and American troops, along with Russian Cossacks, teamed up to save the rare, another word I can't pronounce, Lipizzaner horse breed.
The what?
Lipizzanner. It's a horse breed that was specifically bred by the Austrian royals. It's basically the Habsburgs' royal horse breed.
Interesting.
And the short version of the story is that the SS and the Red Army were both in the area prowling around. The SS were possibly going to kill the horses, as were the Red Army, because they actually had... Long story. I don't have time to get into it. Basically, they need to save the horses from Russians and evil Germans. And so the newly reformed Germans and the newly reformed Russians teamed up with the always the good guys Americans and saved a bunch of the royal horses.
Is this some like weird MLP spin-off
storyline? No, it's not. It's real too. It's a story for another day, but it did happen. So there was the other time. And it's basically almost the exact same time as Castle Itter, by the way. Like, I think might even a matter of hours. Like, it's really that close. Yeah, it's almost simultaneous. But story for another day. But I did want to mention it because a lot of people say Itter is the only time where they teamed up. Technically not the case. And also near the end of World War II, we almost got another wacky Hoi 4 submod to activate because German POWs, by the way, German POWs are their own weird subject. A lot of them end up in very strange places. Many of them actually in the United States itself. In fact, actually, there were local German POW camps in the Red River Valley, which I never knew about.
Where in?
Near, oh gosh, I'd have to double check. But they're kind of like near the Grand Forks and New Ulm area and all that sort of thing. Okay. So like they were right by here.
Interesting.
There was actually a UND professor a few years ago who gave a talk about this. And again, I want to mention that because near the end of World War II, some German POWs actually attempted to, what's the word I'm looking for? Request from the State Department that they be allowed into the U.S. military to fight the Japanese in the Pacific. Because I guess they just were raring to go and thought, let's get at them. And the State Department apparently seriously considered this idea, but eventually nothing ended up coming of it. And so, yeah, there's some other weird, wacky stories, and we almost got like the American newly reformed Foreign Legion to go and fight the Japanese on Okinawa timeline, which I kind of wish we had because it's kind of cool, but like it didn't happen. It was close though. So, and any final thoughts, Darian? Anything that I maybe forgot to mention? Anything else you want to wrap up and mention about Castle Itter and all this other wacky stuff?
I mean, even though it's a very different story, in my mind it sits like right next to that anecdote from the end of World War I, where like 1 hour before the armistice was set to go into effect, there was some like up and coming young German soldier who had a chip on his shoulder and wanted to do a Hail Mary to try to get some level of like notoriety, able to say that he did something in the war.
Mm-hmm.
So he rushed an American Marine machine gun nest and didn't make it out.
Oof.
Like the Marines were telling him to stop, to just turn back because the war was over.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to officially end in 1 hour. No one wanted to fight.
You're going to throw your life away?
For nothing. Like, we have nothing against you. You're just a person. Like, don't be stupid.
Americans always are the good guys. Okay, well, let's not get into that.
We have a very good streak.
We've had a good streak, yes.
American people are great.
Yes.
You can say what you want about our leadership. And
it sucks. The government sucks. The feds can come and find me in my bunker. I will go down fighting. Like Jack Lee himself against Leader, who thankfully didn't die.
Real American hero.
Real American hero. So, yeah, again, it's interesting that all these different forces just coalesce to make this fascinating Hollywood-esque story, because sometimes life is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
History's fun, kids. But, yeah, I think that's all I have. Again, just wanted to... Oh, by the way, I should mention the theme of this early streak of episodes in Side Stories Season 2. Which I forgot to mention at the top of the show, but that's okay. So I wanted to highlight an episode that was the team-up episode, which is the American and Germans, right? Which is the first episode of the new season right here. And the next episode is going to be on Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who is an American hero. And then I thought it'd be interesting to focus on someone from the Axis side of things, too. And so I chose someone, I'm going to keep it a secret because I think y'all will be very interested to learn about what happens in Yugoslavia when the Germans decide to invade. So I'll keep that a secret. But I wanted to highlight the few interesting kind of wacky stories from World War II with this series. So that's the theme going on here.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Oh, you're going to like it. So tune in next time for the exciting story of Teddy Roosevelt Jr. and his exploits on the D-Day landings and various other interesting areas. That's going to be of Jacob. I've already got that episode in the bag, actually, so expect that soon. Every week, every Friday, while episodes last. While episodes last. And yeah, anything else? Do we want to mention about why episodes are delayed? Do we not care? Just want to say they're out now? LOL. Go watch them, or what do you feel?
I mean, you did say at the top of the show that you would provide some sort of explanation.
Okay, all right. Aaron moved into a new house. That delayed me. And then I wrote a bunch of episodes, and I needed to get co-hosts on the show, right? Do the show with me, because I wanted to have people to share the show with, as always. That's what I like doing. I like having a co-host. But unfortunately, everyone's schedule got really busy while Aaron was moving into a house. So I didn't have anywhere to record, and my friends were all busy. So that was the big iffy deal, which is no one's fault, by the way. Not at all. But yeah, that's just kind of what happens. Sometimes life happens, and I know I need a better excuse, but I don't. It's more of I wrote all these episodes. Some people, like, I recorded some episodes of some of the co-hosts, and then I actually had more planned with one of them, but unfortunately their schedule didn't line up. So I have 2 episodes that are fully written and ready to go, but will not be part of the season because it just didn't end up happening.
We've been planning to record this episode for multiple months at this point.
Oh my gosh.
We've scheduled it multiple times, and every time there's just something that comes up.
I know. Well, anyways, I believe that's all that we have for this episode of Side Stories.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the new season. Thank you all for joining us. And to end, I think Captain Lee said it himself. In 1973, just before his death, a journalist asked Lee what he thought of the Battle of Castle Itter. Lee responded, "Well, it was just the damnedest thing." There you have it.
Well put.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. Always appreciate having you. Enjoy the rest of the season. Thank you all.
I bid you all auf Wiedersehen.
Adieu.